Hi everyone, this is Grand Strategy here, and today I'm doing a quick beginner's guide on the CRPG known as Pathfinder Kingmaker. If you're familiar with the old CRPGs like Baldur's Gate, you are probably going to love this game if you love Baldur's Gate. I've not even actually finished the story in this game, but I've spent over 200 hours in it already. So if you're worried about not getting the bang for your buck as far as time gameplay is concerned, you are going to definitely not feel like you've wasted your money. So, this game utilizes the Pathfinder system. It's essentially a derivative of the classic Dungeons and Dragons rule set. So, it's got its own little unique flavor and whatnot, but if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, this shouldn't feel too different in that regard. So, let's go ahead and start with a new game, and we're essentially going to have to pick our difficulty setting. Now, I will be honest with you, this is a very combat heavy experience, so don't be afraid to pick easy or normal mode because you're still going to run into a significant amount of challenge. I've actually wiped several times in normal mode when I was first starting to learn this game. Now I play in challenging, but there are people who play in hard and unfair mode quite effectively. However, again, a fair warning here is that you will be railroaded and higher level difficulties by having to pick the incredibly efficient min-max style builds. So if you're someone who's not interested in approaching a min-maxed selection, then I would definitely pick easy or normal mode. If you're here just to role play your character, which is kind of what I tried to aspire to, easy or normal, don't worry, you can change this later on in the game if you want, but these are difficult in of themselves. One other comment before we move on is the auto level up and kingdom management system. I would leave these to where they are by default, which gives you much more manual control over these systems. And the reason why I say that is a lot of newer players tend to fall into the trap of being like, well, I don't know anything about this game, so I want my companions to all be leveled up automatically, or just even my own main character. And the truth is as you begin to learn more and more about this game, you'll realize the effectiveness of your characters can actually be much more worthwhile if you have manual control and manual knowledge over these characters. There might be even some characters that actually they start off as one class, but if you look at their basic ability score sheet, I mean, they're much more effective as a different class entirely. So with that in mind, it really gives you much more power and control just to sort of learn these systems on your own. And if you do turn auto level ups on and your kingdom management on automatic, it's very difficult to change them back mid-game. So definitely recommend doing these manually. So let's go ahead and start and pick our character. Most people tend to pick the customized character. It has a 25 ability score buy, whereas I think Hedwig and Malaku, etc., they have a 32 point buy, so you will get more bang for your buck with these pre-made characters. However, these characters tend to railroad you into a certain role. So this is a protector. So if you wanted to play a tank and you want to play essentially Hedwig rather than your own character, you can do that. But let's do the customized character because that's typically much more what people are going to commonly pick. We'll go ahead and use Hedwig's portrait, though I like it. Now we have our races here. So there are 3 races that people typically pick for their builds. It's usually human, elf, or Aasimar, so let's quickly go over why that is. With the human, we get a +2 to any of our ability score points, just a flat +2 with no negative. That's really awesome. And we also get a bonus feat. And as we kind of go over our class skills later on, we'll sort of understand why that's so useful. So then we have the elf. Now, if you notice, they immediately take a hit to Constitution, but they do get a +2 intelligence and dexterity. So this would be really great for, say, like a wizard character who uses intelligence as their primary stat. And also, the reason why I say that is because they get this racial trait called Elven Magic, which gives them a +2 to overcome the spell resistance of enemies. So that's a flat +2 for the entire game, and it's extremely effective. So your spells will be much more likely to hit enemies, and that's really awesome. So our last character is the Aasimar. Now, granted, they don't have anything here, but that's because they have not picked their heritage yet, which you'll see in the top here. They eventually get to pick their heritage. And what that typically does is give them a flat +2 into 2 different ability scores. So they'll get a +4 overall to their ability score sheet with no negatives. And that's something that's really, really awesome. And a lot of min-max characters typically pick Aasimar But let's just go ahead and start with the human for now. If you notice, the customization system in this game is just awesome. I love it. I've never had a game ask me like what my main hand is, and this is really awesome. I love the attention to detail. Now we have our classes here. I'm going to link to a video by a guy named Nerd Commando who goes through every single class here with every single different subsect, and this guy definitely knows his stuff. I used his videos myself when I was trying to create my first characters, and he does a really good job of explaining to you which classes are actually effective in this game. Now, I know there's a lot of hardcore Pathfinder people out there who are like, well, clearly, I have my pen and paper class combination and it works really, really well. But there's certain quirks about this game where your certain class combination may just not be very effective compared to, say, this other class combination. So if you're interested in that, I'll link the video down below. What I'm going to do in this video, however, is give you guys the insight on which class combinations here will not be redundant in the typical story companions that you're paired with later on in the game. So there's 3 in particular. There are the Druid, which you don't run into any other druids. Now, granted, you can create like a mercenary or something like that to essentially fill this role if you don't want your main character being the druid, but you want to have a druid in the party. That's another option as well. But keep in mind, mercenaries don't talk, and I like that immersion and the interactivity with the characters. The writing in this game is actually really awesome. So I wouldn't just avoid the story companions like a plague. Like they're actually pretty good. The other class we have here is the Paladin. You do not run into another Paladin. Again, I'm trying to keep this no spoilery, but this is just to help you feel, or try to avoid the anxiety of feeling like the character that you've picked is just going to be outclassed by, this other person you meet down the line, right? And the third is actually the Monk. You do not run into another Monk, and this is just like a really great damage, tanky, high AC class, and it's very effective. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a fighter, and we're going to do a 2-handed fighter, right? And we'll just use him as like a basic example because we're going to be looking at our ability score sheet now. And again, we have our 25-point buy right here. And let's just very quickly talk about the core ability scores. So with strength, this directly affects your melee attacks. So since we're a 2-handed fighter, we're obviously going to be in the melee fray a lot. So maybe we're just going to leave us off on 17 here. Now, a key important thing to remember is that if you're going to be doing your ability scores, if there is an ability score that you intend on making your primary stat, like such as strength, there are breakpoints as you level up where you will get additional ability points. You actually get 5 overall when you reach, so when you reach level 20, you'll have your 5th additional ability score point, but most people typically don't get to level 20 in this game, so you're going to be working with more or less 4 or 3 depending on just how far you get into the game, etc., etc. But the key thing here is that at level 4, which you obtain pretty quickly, you will get an additional ability point. So for instance, with strength, since that'll be my primary stat, it's okay to leave it at 17 because I know very early on in the game I'll be able to pump that up to 18 pretty effectively, and then I get a +5 to all my melee attacks instead of +4. Don't leave stats that you don't intend on leveling up on an odd number. You want it to be even, because if it's odd, you've basically just wasted a point. Now, since we're playing, sort of a human strength character, we'll leave him at 18. We don't want to pump him up to maybe, well, we'll leave it at 16, and then we'll use our racial bonus to pump it up to 18, just so we're not, we're not this hulking barbarian orc or whatever, we're playing more for the character, right? So we're an effective melee fighter at 18, and also strength affects your melee damage as well, so this is a good stat. With dexterity, this more effectively dictates your ranged attacks, so you're more likely to hit with ranged abilities if you have high dexterity scores, so not so effective for us as a fighter. However, it does directly affect our AC, so we're going to be in melee combat a lot, so maybe having a decent dexterity score is nice, maybe like 14. That's good as well. With Constitution, we don't not want to go under 10 because it makes us very liable to being one-shot. If you get one-shot, you die. Yes, characters in this game can die. So we'll go ahead and leave it maybe at 12. That's a respectable Constitution score. We're going to come back to Intelligence very quickly, but let's go over Wisdom. This typically is more useful for clerics and whatnot. However, it does affect your will save score, so it does not hurt to have maybe like 2 points into wisdom. So we got a respectable wisdom score as well. Now with charisma, especially with a fighter, this is typically what's considered a dump stat, which means it's not very useful for you, and you won't be too affected by having a low charisma stat. So you could just, dump your points here and put it maybe in strength or something like that if you want. However, keep in mind that your main character is considered the, quote, face of the party. There will be times where you are the only person who gets to do a charisma check. And if you feel like your character is a charismatic person, even if they're a two-handed fighter, feel free to put some points into your charisma score. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It directly affects your skill points over here, like with your persuasion skill, which is very useful in chat dialogue options. But if you feel like your fighter is a very gruff, non-social type, then maybe they do have a crappy charisma score, and you can just go ahead and roll with that. Now, with that in mind, we skipped over intelligence, and the reason why is just simply because it directly gives you more points per level to allocate into your skills. So let's talk about the skills themselves. So let's say, we're a fairly intelligent two-handed fighter, right? Well, and over here, now we have the ability to pump in 5 points as opposed to, I believe we had 3 here at plus 10. So every level we'll have 5 points to work with. Don't feel like you have to be forced on having every character with high intelligence just for the sake of this. Just ensure that like your wizard characters will typically, because they have a high intelligence score as a base stat, they will have a lot of points to work with over here. Now, since we're kind of like a high strength character, athletics would be real useful for us. Another key tip: make sure that everyone in your party has a decent perception score, even if there's someone who doesn't really utilize perception that often, or wisdom as their primary stat. But that's because as your party's advancing around the map, perception allows you to discover hidden objects or treasures, and you get a lot of good stuff from that. And if you only have one character with a high perception score, that's only one person who's essentially rolling for perception. If your whole party's rolling for perception, even your high perception character will fail a roll eventually. So having everyone with high perception really helps. This is the only stat I would recommend having everyone have. Everyone else maybe have like 1 point and use magic device, simply because that allows you the ability to use magical scrolls and whatnot. But other than that, let your other points specialize in the character's class abilities themselves. Like, for instance, if you've got a high dexterity character and they're sort of your sneaky, roguey type, then definitely put their points into trickery and stealth and specialize them in that way. So let's just go ahead and just put our last 2 points in here. Not really too important for a warrior, honestly. So let's go into our next page here. And we are immediately hit with all these different feats. Now, fighters in particular get bonus combat feats out the wazoo, so a lot of people like to actually pick warrior just because you get a lot more access to these feats. And these feats are extremely important for making your character much, much stronger and more effective in a party combat situation. Now, here's a key thing I want to point out for anyone who wants to play a ranged character. If you do not pick the following feats, you will feel like you are a wet noodle. You need point blank shot, and you also need precise shot. I don't think it's here immediately, but it essentially reduces the penalty to shooting at enemies who are engaged in melee, which is going to be happening a lot. If you do not have point blank shot and precise shot, you basically just won't be hitting any of your shots, and you'll feel like, why the hell did I just pick an archer? This feels awful. Now, since we're a melee character, we do not need point blank shot. So what we would maybe want instead is, because our strength stat is already pretty high, we might want something like power attack. So again, we're going to take a penalty to our actual attack here. Yeah, so we do get a -1 to our melee attack roll, but we get a +2 to our melee damage roll. So when we hit hard, and we also get a 50% bonus if we're hitting with a two-handed weapon, so we're going to hit extra hard since we're a two-handed fighter. This is extremely effective for us. Now, since we have point blank shot, we don't really need that, so what would we replace that with? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can go with this, and I'll again leave the Nerd Commando video to sort of help specify here, but you could go, say, down the cleave tree, which allows you to hit 2 people at the same time. Or you can go maybe down the weapon focus tree. So if you feel like, okay, yes, I am totally going to go down great swords, I'm only going to use great swords, then go down the great sword tree and you'll get a +1 to your attack roll now. And that actually sort of makes up for that power attack that you just picked. And as long as you're using great swords, you're going to get a +1 to your attack. Very, very effective. So now we get a bonus combat feat. So we end up with 3 feats because we picked a human fighter. And if we want, we can maybe pick a party trait in particular. So, for instance, coordinated maneuvers can be very useful. Let's see. There's actually well, okay. So dodge is a useful one. You just get a free +1 AC. Dazzling display can be useful, and I don't think I have access to it right now, but there are some traits later on, like I think like outflank, which if 2 different characters have that same trait, if the enemy that they're both fighting is outflanked, then my character as the actual damage dealer will be getting a +4 to his attack rolls. So these sort of party combined traits are extremely useful and make you much more effective in combat. So we'll just go ahead and for the sake of this video, we'll pick Cleave. And we'll go ahead and go to next. So now we've got our character here. We can pick our alignment. This is really all up to you. And I will admit, this game does a fantastic job of making you feel like every alignment has an effective use. Yes, you can have a chaotic, evil kingdom with skeleton guards running around, and it is extremely fun and brings a smile to my face every single time. The actual kingdom management part of this game is just a joy to interact with. Or you can just do your typical lawful goody 2 shoes. I personally prefer lawful neutral myself, so I'm going to pick lawful neutral, and you get to pick your voice, and you can pick whatever you want with that. Your birthday actually does matter. I won't spoil as to why, but yes, your birthday is important, and we can pick our name. We'll just maybe pick like Arthael. Yeah, that's a good kind of fantasy name, right? And we'll go to our next, and here we go. We're ready to start the game. Granted, we'll probably run into another fighter character for our party. Fighters are typically common in these RPGs, but I think we're pretty ready to start. So I won't spoil the game because at this point it's all on you. And I just hope you really enjoy this. And feel free to post any comments if you have any questions. And good luck. Grand Stratagem here signing out.